Hi everyone, my name is Elina. I'm a watercolor artist and educator, and in this video I'll show you how to create beautiful watercolor texture with the help of granulating paints. Let's get started. Here are the materials I'll use today. The paper is from the 500 series Ready Cut Watercolor paper by Strathmore. It is 100% cotton and 300 GSM. This one is 8 by 10 inches and I've already taped it to the board that comes with the package using paper tape. This will keep it in place and prevent it from buckling. I also already did the sketch, and if you want to follow along you can pause here and copy it. The paints I'll be using are the new MaimeriBlu landscape theme sets. This one is the Venice set. It contains 6 beautiful and very rich colors. All of them are single pigmented and have excellent light fastness. I've already squeezed a small amount of each onto my ceramic palette. My brushes are by Princeton. The flat wad is from their Neptune series and the others are from the Aqua Elite series. It's a very nice set of brushes, basically all you need to create a full painting. Let me just spray my paints with some clean water to activate them. I also have 2 jars of water, a cotton towel and a paper towel, and that's all I'll be using today. Let's start painting. I start by wetting the paper. I go around the door and window, and I also go around the boat. I will place my paper tape below my board to create a slope. This way the water will flow down instead of creating puddles on the paper surface. If water goes over the areas we want to protect, you can soak it up with the paper towel. I make sure my paper is very well moistened. This will allow me to work wet and wet for longer. While the paper is soaking up the water, I can prepare my mixes. For the exposed brick part of the wall, I will mix together Pyrrole Orange and Permanent Mother Deep. I get this rusty red, and sometimes I'll use more orange and sometimes I use more of that Permanent Mother Deep to make the brick wall more interesting. But before that, I will paint the pink area of the wall. This is where we'll play with granulation to create a beautiful texture that emphasizes the old Venetian wall. So I take some of that potter's pink. This color is granulating, as is the blue in this set, cerulean blue. At first, I'll use it diluted with water. I add some spots with it, and you can immediately notice that the pigment particles are large, which instantly gives a beautiful texture to the wall. I add more spots, leaving some white spaces here and there. I also added a bit of quinacridone red to the mix just to make it more interesting. I continue adding the spots, going around the window and door. I found that the best way to take advantage of granulating colors is to first use them on wet paper in a diluted form, then take more concentrated pigment and drop it onto the still wet surface. Now the effect is even more pronounced. It's important to work wet and wet, this way the larger particles that give the paint the granulation can settle on their own in the depths of the paper's texture. And speaking of paper, the more pronounced the texture, the more visible the granulating effect will be, so it will be more noticeable on rough paper compared to cold press and will be less pronounced on hot press paper. I go over the areas where the paint has peeled, exposing the brick wall underneath. Once you drop the paint, leave it be, don't go over it with your brush, just let the watercolor do the work. Now I'm dropping in even more concentrated paint, and by the way, the spots I'm adding are totally random. If you're following along, don't overthink it, think of it as play, add the spots whenever you feel like. Splatters are another great and super easy way to add texture. You can splatter both paint and water to create different effects. Now let's go back to the orange mix we created earlier. With that, I'll cover the areas where the plaster has peeled off. Adding some darker paint around the edges to create contrast. You can use a smaller brush for this, but I find that this one comes to a very fine point, so I don't lose time switching between brushes. Here on this side as well. and here above the window. If your paint is spreading too much, use a paper towel to take off the excess moisture from your brush. Now let's mix the darker brown by combining Permanent Mother Deep and Cerulean Blue. I'll use it to cover the area that is close to the water, carefully going around the boat. Now I'll use my flat brush and the same combination of Permanent Mother Deep and Pyrrole Orange to paint some bricks. The flat brush is perfect for this. Sometimes I pick up darker paint. This will make the bricks more interesting. You can add as many or as few as you want. It's not necessary to fill the entire area. Just a few for suggestion will also work. Of course, you can use a round brush too, but the effect will be a bit different. I'll go back to that brown now, increasing the contrast by adding a thin shadow here. And also below each brick, this will give them volume. A thin shadow around the window and door as well. Increasing the shadows on the bricks since the paint has spread a little. And finally, before leaving it to dry, let's paint the water. I will mix cerulean blue and Indian yellow to get this beautiful cobalt green color. I add it around the boat and its reflection. Some strokes with blue to create ripples. Blending the area together with the wall for a seamless transition. I add some Permanent Mother Deep to that green mix to create an even darker brown, which I'll use to add a few darker lines here. Some splatters, and now let's leave it to dry. My painting is now dry and I will use the flat brush to soften the hard edges. This step is completely optional. I just love when objects have softer transitions instead of harsh borders. I use a clean down brush and scrub it over the hard edge until it softens, then blot with a clean napkin. I rotate my paper to make this process easier. Depending on your paint and paper, you might need a stiffer brush and scrub harder to get the desired result. You can also use this technique to add a small highlight to each brick. This will really make them look three-dimensional. I use watery violet mix to cover the white borders of the door and window. I don't want them to be completely white, but before applying the paint, I dab my brush on a towel to soak up some of the moisture. This gives me a dry brush effect, which is also great for creating texture. I'll water down some of that dark brown and use it to paint the wooden planks of this part of the door. Adding more blue will turn it into a gray tone. I like to mix different colors when painting wooden planks. Since there's also a shadow here, I'll add that as well. Some horizontal strokes help define the separate planks. Along with a few smudges of color here and there. For the other part of the door, I mix a watery blue and add some of that diluted brown. Why not a touch of orange too? After all, Venice is a colorful city. Adding yellow to the blue gives me this dusty green. I finish with some brown at the bottom. Now I'm ready for the thin shadows. I add them around the door and between the planks, along with some random spots for texture. For the window, I start by covering it with the diluted reddish brown mix. Then I use the negative space technique, painting the darker parts to make the lighter window parts stand out. I'm not being too precise, but if you prefer a more accurate look, take your time. I soften the edges with a down brush similar to how I did earlier with the flat brush to create a more natural effect. I add a few more shadows and spots on the door to build texture. Then I go back in with the flat brush to create highlights on the planks, just like I did with the bricks. Let's also add a handle to the door. Finally, I quickly paint the boat using the wet and wet technique to create blurry, undefined edges. Since our main focus is the wall with its door and window, I'll keep the boat loose and less detailed. In the end, I decided to cover the remaining white areas with a thin glaze of color as they looked too stark against the vibrant wall. And here it is, our colorful Venice scenery is complete. This is one of my favorite things to paint and I could create 1,000 variations of it. So try it out for yourself and see how fun it is. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and until the next time.